Thank you for joining me in today's webinar, Setup for Success, Understanding SchoolPace Rostering Setup with Clever. I'm really excited that we have so many people from districts all across the US. So we have people from Virginia, from Pennsylvania, from New York, from Oregon. So it's great to have you all. I'm Laura Villabapo. I'm the EdTech Integration Specialist at American Reading Company. I support districts with third-party integrations. I have teaching experience in kindergarten, K-4 science, and college philosophy and ethics. I also have experience in trade publishing and marketing, so I've always been a huge advocate for reading. In my previous role, I supported 15 schools and 2 school districts as their EdTech coordinator. Presenting with me today is Victoria Lawrence from Clever. Victoria, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name's Victoria. I am one of the customer success managers for our application partners here at Clever. I've been at Clever for a little bit over 1.5 years. So before this position, I was on our support team. So I know the product really well, and I'll just be helping you guys understand a little bit more about sharing rules. So super excited to be here.
And now that you have met us both, you'll be hearing about the SchoolPace side from me and the Clever specific information from Victoria. There's lots to cover in the SchoolPace and Clever realm, but we are focusing on the beginning of the year setup so that we can all set you all up for success in the upcoming school year. I also want to add that this webinar is being recorded, and you will be sent the recording 1 to 2 days after the webinar with a copy of the deck that we're using as well. There are links within the deck that you can click on that will bring you over to a specific guide or resource. So throughout this presentation, sometimes I will let you know where you would find the resource or what slide you would find a specific resource. So be mindful of that as we present as well. Today, what we're going to cover is we're going to cover how Clever and SchoolPace work together. We're also going to talk about how to create sharing rules so that you are rostering for SchoolPace. We'll go into rules for admin and support staff as well. Then we'll go over how you can get support and who to reach out for what, followed by a Q&A. As you can see that there's a chat and a Q&A. So I'll give you guys a minute to look for the Q&A portion on the lower right corner of your screen. As we're going through all of the information, please feel free to enter in any questions that you have in the Q&A portion, not in the chat. This allows us to better answer some of the questions and answers towards the question and answer portion. So I'll repeat this again. Please feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A section and not in the chat. We'll have a team that may answer your question as we go along to the best of our ability. And then we'll go over all of the questions and all of the possible answers in the Q&A portion. I'd also like to thank some of you for asking some of your questions ahead of time and made sure that we were addressing all of the correct issues and to make sure that all of your needs were met as well. So some of the questions that were submitted, we will address how to give administrators access to SchoolPace if they do not have Clever access. We're also going to cover the beginning of the year implementation process. We're going to talk a little bit about single sign-on with Clever, but we will not cover in this webinar is SchoolPace basics. That's also another portion that we're happy to talk about at a different webinar. However, we won't have time to go over SchoolPace basics such as how to enter in data in the ERLA, pull reports, and things like that. But it's something that we'll be open to in the future. So I first wanted to give an overview of the setup process. Once your district has their licenses activated to when you start rostering. So the first step is that the school district must submit a school implementation checklist. It's also known as a setup checklist. When your license are activated, it will notify your account manager and they'll forward your district an email that has a link to the setup checklist. You might not have seen this setup checklist, but the person who is in charge of ARC implementation might have filled out the questions or asked you to input any of the answers to those questions. They may have asked you questions such as rostering. Also, you might have filled out a portion of the checklist as well, because multiple people can make inputs into the checklist. So as you can see on the screen, that's what the setup checklist will look like. In order to start rostering, your school or district will need to fill out and submit the implementation checklist. The checklist is where you will indicate the rostering method. And if you're joining us for this webinar, it will be Clever. And it will ask you to import the rostering start and end dates. These rostering start and end dates indicate when SchoolPace will start and stop rostering with Clever. Please also give yourself time between submitting the setup checklist with the first day that you want SchoolPace to be used, because it can take a few days to get completely set up. So give yourself some time for setup and submit the implementation checklist or setup checklist as soon as you have all of the available information. Or you can reach out to the person who is responsible for filling out the checklist and follow up with them. Then SchoolPace support will reach out with rostering next steps. So after the setup checklist is submitted, SchoolPace support will reach out to the rostering contact, which should be you, to confirm the rostering type and the rostering start and end date. Then the next step will be invite and notify acceptance. At the same time, you'll receive an email from SchoolPace support. You'll also receive emails from Clever inviting you to connect with SchoolPace and other accompanying apps. Once you accept the invitation, please let SchoolPace support know by emailing them back. There's syncing data that we only view when our invitation has been accepted. And when you notify us that you accepted our invitation, it allows us to update our systems so that our syncing can start on the rostering start date. If you are switching from a different rostering method to Clever, it doesn't hurt to let us know then as well. There'll be additional steps that we'll need to take to prevent duplicate accounts from being created, but I'll touch upon that a little bit later. Then you can set your rules. More information will come about that on how to set your rules in Victoria's section. So get ready for that. Once you have your SchoolPace rules set up, all you have to do is just wait until your rostering start date in order to see your rosters updated in SchoolPace. There are also some important notes that I would like for you to all know about SchoolPace. So SchoolPace is the main rostering app. What you'll need to do is copy your rules that you set in SchoolPace to all of the other apps that you purchased. For example, if you create rules in SchoolPace, you'll need to copy those exact rules to ARC Bookshelf, to SchoolPace Connect, and to ARC Adventures if you purchase them. If you deviate, there is a possibility that there will be a disruption in access. So some of the users might receive an error when they're trying to sign in through single sign-on. So SchoolPace is the main rostering app, and the rest of the apps are just used for single sign-on. When actively syncing, changes in Clever will reflect the next day in SchoolPace. So even though the rosters are updated when you look in Clever, SchoolPace won't pick up those changes until the next day. If you do need a manual sync, feel free to reach out to the SchoolPace support. However, during the back to school time, the best practice is to wait for the overnight sync, because our support team will be handling a high volume of tickets. But if you feel like it's an emergency, still feel free to reach out to SchoolPace support so we can get that manually synced for you. Clever rosters are also updated every night. what happens is rosters are wiped, then re-rostered so that it could match the Clever share. So anyone or any classroom that isn't shared in Clever will be removed from SchoolPace the next day. So they have to be shared in Clever in order for you to see it in SchoolPace. This excludes admins that have been manually created. If you are switching, the implementation checklist or the setup checklist indicates when SchoolPace will start and stop syncing with Clever. So pay attention to those dates when those emails are being sent out to you. And then lastly, if you're switching from a different rostering type to Clever, there's an additional match process that we'll have to complete before we start syncing with Clever. So like I mentioned, this is to prevent duplicate accounts from being created. So once your data looks good, we'll activate the sync with Clever so that you can start syncing on your rostering start date. But also during this process, our SchoolPace support team will be working with you throughout this process to update you on the progress. Excellent. I also wanted to include some of the features that SchoolPace does not support. SchoolPace does not support multi-role users at this time. That means that a user can't be a teacher and a school admin. So if, for example, if you have a case where a teacher is also a school admin, the teacher can be created through the sync with Clever, and then you'll have to manually create the admin login for that user. Then the admin account will need to log in through that separate portal. A link to the portal will be found on slide 16. So if you ever needed to find out what the login portal for external for admin that have been manually created, just go to slide 16 when you receive the resources. Feel free to reach out to SchoolPace support for step-by-step directions if this fits your scenario. Something else that SchoolPace does not support is that the same user or same students cannot be in 2 or more schools. Teachers, staff, and students can't be at 2 schools at once. So if you do have a staff member that assists multiple schools, my advice is to either make them a district admin, but that would also give them district admin access, or just add them as a school admin for the school that they support. Yet again, in this case, we'll have to log in through our external portal called ArcID to access SchoolPace. The other information I want you to know is that there is a 1-to-1 ratio. So 1 Clever school to 1 SchoolPace school. Awesome. And before I kick this off to Victoria, I just want to mention the support documents that you can access. I also want to add that not everyone will be setting their sharing rules the exact same way. So what we're showing you are the most common ways to set up your sharing rules, and you can either alter the rules to fit your district or your school's needs. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to Victoria to show you how to share rules or set your sharing rules.
So as you can see, this is just a Clever dashboard. So just to do a little bit of an overview, obviously, if you need to go to SchoolPace, you can either see it is listed right here at the bottom, or you can just type it in the search bar. And there we are. And I just want to quickly go over this overview page because there is some pretty helpful information here. So you can see SchoolPace is the application and it is launched. Here, typically, I have a demo account, so it is a little bit different, but you would be able to see the last time your district synced with the application. So if you're waiting for changes to go through or something like that, this sync time would be helpful. You'll also see that it only supports teacher, staff, district admins, number of shared schools, and launch date. If we go a little bit further down, you will see shared data. Laura, are you trying to say
Victoria,
something?
I do have a question. What does the launch date mean in the overview page?
Yeah, so this means that is when it will be launched for users. So that is when it will show up in a user's portal.
Yeah, so you won't see the icon until August 11th in that case then, right?
Correct. Yes, it wouldn't
Thank
show up until then. There are also statuses, which Lori, I can send you. There are different statuses that can show up here, but launch will mean, yeah, exactly correct. That is the day that the icon will appear. And then, so if we go a little bit further down, you will see shared data. So after we take a look at the sharing permissions, you'll see this is what you included, the data that you wanted to share with the application. And then over here to the right, you will see what the application is receiving. You can always download any of these data sets here to make sure that the students you'd like to be shared, teachers, sections, etc., are included right here. Okay, let's take a look at some sharing rules. So I went ahead and just created some. As Lori said, there are different ways that you can set up your sharing permissions. So I just wanted to have a couple of examples here. A great way to think about it is the broader your rule is, the more data you will share. And obviously the inverse is that if you really tweak your rules to be a little bit more specific, the data set that you're sharing will be a little bit smaller. So let's just take a look at a couple. So this first one here says sections where subject equals English language arts. If we take a look at this rule specifically, this means that any section in Clever with the subject of English will be shared with SchoolPace. A great thing that you can always do is take a look at the bottom to see exactly what sections are being shared. So you'll see this shares quite a bit of sections, 431, which you'll see down here. You can always go through and look at the exact sections that are being shared. This filters by 10, but you can always increase that to more depending on how much you're sharing. So this is a pretty big rule. Obviously, you'll also see the subject here, so it's doing exactly what we want it to do. Next one we'll look at is a little bit more specific. So in this case, we're sharing sections where SISID equals, and we picked certain SISIDs for section, and course name. So that's not as broad as that first rule we just looked at. But again, if you want to be a little bit more specific with your rules, you can set it up like this. And then again, you will see at the bottom, the course name is group guidance. SISIDs that are being shared will be listed right here at the bottom. So you'll be able to see that that matches up, and you'll see that that's sharing 11 sections in total.
Victoria, can you zoom in so that they can see the data a little bit closer?
Or I'm actually oddly horrible at zooming in. Is that better? Is that bigger?
Yeah, can you do maybe one more? That might be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So yeah, just get a closer look. Again, I'm sorry if you couldn't see that, but we picked a couple of specific section SISIDs. So if you have specific sections that you want to share with SchoolPace that have a common course name of group guidance, you will see at the bottom here that that all matches up. We have group guidance classes. We have those section SISIDs that we chose, and we'll see that it's sharing a total of 11 sections. So obviously not as broad as that first rule. Look at a few more. This one is pretty similar. Sections where SISID equals, again, that means we are only sharing these sections. So again, if you want to get really specific and only share specific sections, you would just type those in here. And if you wanted to add more, you could always just start typing those SISIDs and they would pop up, and you'll be able to see them again at the bottom of the screen. And just to show you one more, this one has a couple more elements to it. So in this one, we are only sharing sections at one school, Baymont Middle, where student grade equals 6th and 7th grade and subject equals English. So again, pretty specific. We're only sharing sections at one school. We've chosen certain grades and a certain subject. So this is, again, if you have one school, you know exactly what grades that you want, you know the subject you'd like to be shared, you can do it this way. Another thing that I'd like to note is that you can always exclude. So say we want to share all grades except 6th and 7th grade. Instead of equals as the condition, you can choose does not equal. And you'll see that changes what's being shared down here at the bottom. So because we are not sharing 6th and 7th grade, we're only going to share 8th grade because those are the only 3 grades at this middle school. So there is a lot you can do here. Like Lori kind of mentioned, it can get a bit overwhelming, but if you kind of click around and you use this feature at the bottom, you'll have a pretty good indicator of what exactly is being shared over to SchoolPace. Lori, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Victoria, sending the conditions under the field student grades, can you make it equals any of 6th and 7th? I also want to note one other thing. If you're looking at the shared rules right now, you'll see under the 3rd rule where it says where the field is subjects equals any of English language arts. If you're looking at the preview on the bottom that Victoria is showing, what you're doing is you're pulling in all of the courses, in this case, that is known for being English language arts. As you can see, that includes any of those English classes 601, 602, 603, but it also includes journalism elective and creative writing elective. If you wanted to exclude that, what you would do is add new filter. You can also do the subject is under subject. Can you do that anymore, Victoria?
We probably want to do by SISID because the subject for all these is still going to be English.
Yep, makes sense. And then you can do the SISID to exclude that. And then you're going to choose does not equal because you want to remove that specific course. And then just type in the SISID and it will exclude those from the count. So you'll see it go away. The other thing that I also want to discuss is how important it is to share by section. There are 2 main reasons why we would like for you to share only the sections that are using SchoolPace. One of them is for data accuracy. If you share sections that aren't using SchoolPace, some of the metrics will be off, such as the average growth level by school or any metric that measures averages for the larger group. So let's say if music was included in the Clever Share as well, your average growth for the school will be affected because no one's entering any information or data in the music class or the art class that has been shared. So it will affect what your average growth will be. The second reason why we ask to share only the sections that will be used is because we want to avoid duplicate classes. It's a common issue that occurs when school districts just share, have a more broad sharing rule and share only either all classes or all classes in a specific subject. Sometimes you'll see 2 of the very similar classes show up. So for example, sometimes English 1 and English 1 Lit Lab, sometimes they'll both show up. Some schools have a component where you have a English 1 and then you have a lab component. You'll have the same rosters and the rosters will be duplicated. And some teachers say that they would rather have 1 roster to input information in as opposed to 2. I also want to mention that when you're entering data into SchoolPace, it is connected to the school, to the student's profile. So that data will follow that student from year to year as well. Excellent. And like I said here, all of the support documents you'll receive within our follow-up email. There are some suggestions for how to create some of your sharing rules included in this as well. Awesome. I guess I'll first just go into a few tips and tricks for the specific sharing rules. Give me 1 second. The more complex the schedule, the more simple the rules will be. The more simple the schedule, the more simple the rules will be. The more complex the schedule, the more complex your rules will be. When you're thinking about setting your rules, think about the highest grouping when you're setting your rules. I know that when we say we prefer you to share your sections that will be using SchoolPace, there might be like, oh my God, that's so many sections to share. just think about the highest grouping. So for example, let's look at English 1. We have English 1, the course code is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you set your rule so that you are sharing English 1, either the course name English 1 or the course number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what will be shared with us is English 1, section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4, and section 5. So when you're individually setting your rules, you don't have to include each individual sections. Just think about the highest grouping. Another example is, let's say you have section 5, that's just an additional support section, and you don't want to include that section 5. You can use one of those exclusionary rules that Victoria just showed you. Just exclude this section 5 out. So what your rules would be is you're setting your sharing rules to share either course name English 1 or course number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then set a rule to say not to share with the either SISID that has English 1 section 5, or just exclude course name English 1 section 5 or course code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 section 5. Those are some options that you can actually take. I will also now kick it off to Victoria to talk about how to get admin in to SchoolPace.
Okay, great. So just going back to the rules, if you have a staff member that is already in Clever, again, there is a bit of leeway about how you can go about this. So this first one, you'll see staff where email equals. So this is just if you have specific staff members that you know need access to SchoolPace, you can just type their email out right here. And that's pretty specific. You'd be naming each one is one staff member. And like we just went over before, if you went about it this way, you would see those specific staff members that end up being shared with SchoolPace. A couple other options. The second is if you have a certain title that you'd like to be shared. So here in this example, I have instructional coach. This could also be SPED teacher, paraprofessional, principal, something like that. If within your district, like Lori was just going over, that higher grouping is just a title, you can just go by that title and share that with SchoolPace. And then a third example right below is title and schools administered. So again, just adds on to that previous rule. Here we'll see assistant principal and principal at specific schools. You can always, like we just went over, change that to does not equal, and you'll see different titles come up. You can add multiple schools here. You can take out schools. That's all kind of up to your discretion. Lori, did you want to go over co-teachers a little bit? Then I can give a little bit more about staff.
Yeah, of course. So one of the most common questions we get is, how do I get my co-teacher access to SchoolPace? So the best way to give a co-teacher access is to add them as a co-teacher in the SIS. That way it passes to Clever and they're attached to that class or section as a co-teacher. And if you manually create them as a co-teacher in SchoolPace, they will be removed because of the Clever overnight sync. So any teacher that is, so if you manually add a teacher, go there the next day, you'll see that they might not be there because they weren't added through Clever. If you do have a teacher that is supporting several classrooms or schools, my recommendation is either add them as a co-teacher to all the sections they support, or make them a school admin so that they have access to all courses, but know that they have school admin access and permissions. And the other thing that you can do is you can add them to, if you want them to have access to Clever, but you know that they're not in the SIS, you can add them to the staff file. And Victoria will talk about adding them to the staff file so that they can access it through Clever instead of having an external portal. My recommendation would be, if you know that support staff will be using Clever for other apps and will need admin access to other apps, it might be easier to add them through the staff file as well. Victoria, you can go ahead and show them about the staff file.
Okay, so like Lori said, if you have some users that are not in Clever and they're not in your SIS, but they still need access to SchoolPace, you can just upload them directly within your dashboard. So on the left menu bar over here, if we scroll all the way down to Sync and then Staff, if you scroll down, you'll see manual upload. So here you can just upload a staff CSV that would be formatted just as you would any other file that you would upload to Clever based on our SFTP spec. So I'll just go to that really quickly. This shows this is the information that you would have to include in that staff file. So school ID, staff ID, email, first and last name, and you could just manually upload that right here. You would obviously click upload. I have one already, so it's not allowing me, but you would click upload those users that aren't in your SIS. And once you do that, it would be as if they are coming over from your SIS. So once you upload that manually, they are in Clever, and you would be able to go back to your sharing permissions and add them as any other staff members. So like we just went over by email, by title, school, things like that. So again, yeah, that's right on the sync staff page, and you would go to manual upload and upload that file.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Victoria. And these are the documents that you can use to add staff and some of the roles that you can set by allowing your admin and other staff to get access as well. This link here is the ArcID login portal. If you manually create any admin accounts, you can click into this link, which is arcid.americanreading.com, and that's where all of your like manually created admin can log into. And then these are some other different ways that you can add some of your staff members as well. Lovely. Some bonus content if we had time, but I'll quickly touch upon this. I know that this year, basically data is being used very heavily. You want to be able to include information such as if they're remote or if they are SPED or free and reduced lunch or their gender. You can add custom fields to Clever. Before you do that, just feel free to reach out to SchoolPace support and we'll be able to guide you through that process. There is custom data that you can share with us, and there's also data that we have already set up so that you can see it as flags in SchoolPace. But please reach out to us first and we can discuss what we can and can't do in that case as well. Awesome. And then now I wanted to talk about support structures. For any of the questions that you may have, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at SchoolPace support. You can email schoolpace@americanreading.com and then reach out to us for anything such as login access issues with SchoolPace. If you'd like to run a manual sync, any specific questions that regard SchoolPace, such as some of the know-hows of SchoolPace, definitely don't hesitate to reach out to us. Also, before I hand it off to Victoria, I wanted to discuss a link, an important link. If you click on the link here, it will show you a Clever and ARC setup guide, which will basically show or tell you a lot of the information that we're sharing with you in this webinar. Victoria will show that in a little bit. If you wanted to get support from Clever, you would have to go to the website support.clever.com. This will take you to their knowledge base. And then I'm going to kick it off to Victoria to talk about the type of things that they support, in addition to how to apply for a support ticket.
Like Lori said, you would go to support.clever.com to get to our help center. We do have a lot of great articles here. It's a great place to go just kind of as a first step. If you're confused about something, you'll see sharing permissions, teacher, things with badges, messaging, stuff like that. If you want to submit a ticket, you'll go to this bottom little blue icon here at the bottom right. You would select your role, Clever Admin. And usually it will prompt you to essentially try to see if we can find an article to help you. So we'll say other issue. Ready to help. And then you would type your question, and then this will essentially prompt you to submit a support case, which one of our CF people can help you with from there. And just to show you how easy it is to get through the help center, like Lori said, there is a setup guide, which is super helpful. So if we just type ARC right here, it will pop up. And a lot of the information we covered will be in this article. So this is something that you can just kind of go back to get information on how to get all set up.
Thanks so much, Victoria. And then, like I said, this is all the information on the support structure. And then we're going to jump into the Q&A. But before we jump into the Q&A, I just first would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I'd love for all of you to join us for the Q&A portion. But before we head into the Q&A portion, I'd like to know on a scale from 1 to 5, how confident you are in setting up your Clever rules to roster SchoolPace. So in the chat, not the Q&A portion, but in the chat, if you can type in a number, any number from 1 to 5. 1 being you're not confident at all in setting up your rules, and then 5, you're super confident and we killed it and gave you everything you needed. So I'll give you guys a few minutes to kind of give me a gauge. So 1, if you're not confident in setting up your rules, 5, if you're very confident. Cool, I'm getting a couple 5s, some 4s. Awesome. Cool. And like I said, if you guys would like to join us for the Q&A portion, please feel free to do so. And then when you do close out the screen, you'll be taken to a survey. Please fill out the survey. I'd love to hear your thoughts, any other information that you all would like to see, view, hear, any other further questions that you have, or anything that can make our webinars more purposeful for you. Any feedback that would make it, that will improve the process of the SchoolPay process or implementation process for you. We'd love to hear any of that feedback. So if you don't decide to join us for the Q&A portion, please make sure that you are filling out that survey at the end. Awesome, cool. So the first thing that I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through some of our questions. I'm going to read the question and say it out, say the answers out loud as well. Lovely. One question that was asked is, can the launch date be changed? This wasn't answered, but yes, the launch date can always be changed. Victoria, do you know if the launch date can be changed on their end as well?
Yeah, so this was kind of asked a couple of times. So there is an answer under the answered, but that's all up to you guys. So that can't be changed by the district admin within the district dashboard. But if you need SchoolPace to change it, then you could just reach out to them and discuss what date you'd like it to be, and then they can change it on their end so that the correct date populates in your dashboard.
Yeah, we're happy to do that as well. There's another question asked, is there a plan to be able to support users with multi-role users or multiple locations? So thank you so much for your question. This is something that we're working towards and hope to be able to support in the future as well. So as of right now, there is no, we don't have it available, but it's something that we would love to support because we know that districts, that is a scenario that districts do have quite often. One of the open questions that are asked, if we manually upload school admin to Clever, will they be considered manually loaded users into ARC? That's a great question. If you manually upload users through Clever, they can sign in through Clever because then from that point, if you upload them as a staff member, they'll be able to use single sign-on for any of the other apps, and they'll be considered admin if you decide that they need access to other applications as well. So it won't only apply to us, it will apply to all of the other programs that you use as well. So if you do manually create them in SchoolPace, they'll only be admins in SchoolPace, if that makes sense. Cool. I'm also going to stay on. Feel free to ask more of your questions We'll be happy to hear them. I'm also going to check the chat just to make sure there isn't any questions in the chat. Oh, you guys are all lovely. And then the question, will the presentation be shared? Yes, you will receive an email either tomorrow or the day after that with a recording and the slide deck as well that we used. All right. I don't see any other questions as of right now, but yet again, I want to thank you all for joining us. If you have any feedback, please include that in the survey at the end. And then if you have any issues with your setup, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll be happy to assist. Thank you so much.